This is a story that I'm sure you've never heard of. A story that everyone tries to hide from you. The true story of Little Red Riding Hood. Totally different from the beautiful story that you're used to seeing. Once upon a time, in a village forgotten by time, surrounded by dense forests and dark mountains, there lived a young girl named Claire. Known for the scarlet cloak she wore, a gift from her grandmother, she was loved for her courage, but also feared for her curiosity. Her mother, ever stern, warned her, never stray from the path, and above all, never trust strangers. One day, as dusk fell, Claire was tasked with an important mission, to take supplies to her grandmother who lived alone in a cabin deep in the forest. The girl hesitated. There was something different about the forest lately, a thicker silence, longer shadows. But concern for her grandmother prevailed. She picked up the basket, adjusted her cloak, and set off into the dusk. As she walked along the trail, the sounds of the village faded away. The forest surrounded her like an ancient whisper, full of secrets. Claire stared at the trees, scarred with deep scratches, as if giant creatures had passed through them. Strange footprints appeared on the ground, too large for any animal she knew. The wind carried the smell of damp earth and something else, something sweet and bitter at the same time. It was then that she found him. A tall man with golden eyes that seemed to reflect every ray of light at the end of the day appeared in the middle of the trail. He was dressed simply, but there was something about his presence that made Claire's skin crawl. He smiled, a sharp, calm smile. "Good evening, young man," he said, bowing his head slightly. "It's not common to find someone like you this deep in the forest." Claire felt a chill but answered firmly, "I'm going to visit my grandmother. She lives in the cottage over the hill." The man raised an eyebrow as if the answer amused him. "The old lady? Oh, I hear she's not well. Perhaps you'd better hurry." There was something wrong with this man. His eyes, even in the twilight, seemed to see right through her. He introduced himself as Lucian and walked beside her for a while, asking simple questions, but his words carried an enigmatic tone, as if each sentence were part of a larger puzzle. As they approached the cottage, Lucian disappeared, leaving Claire alone in front of the door. Something was wrong. The house was too quiet, but the table was set, and the smell of fresh food filled the air. Claire called for her grandmother, but no one answered. As she explored, she found disturbing signs: a strand of gray hair stuck in a splinter of wood, stains of something dark on the floor, torn fabrics. Her heart raced, but she didn't have time to react before a familiar voice sounded behind her. "You're here." It was Lucian. He was inside the house now, but he no longer looked human. His eyes shone brightly, and his presence seemed to consume all the air in the small cottage. "Where's my grandmother?" Claire asked, her voice shaking. Lucian smiled. "She offered me a feast, Claire. You understand, don't you? The people of your village have told stories about me for generations. The wolf, the predator. They forget that I am not just hunger. I am a mirror." Claire tried to run, but Lucian blocked her exit. He approached and proposed a game. "If you can fool me, I'll let you go. If you fail, you'll be my next meal, but not in the way you imagine. I don't devour bodies, Claire. I feed on something much deeper. Your fear, your courage, your secrets. You'll be an empty cocoon when I'm done." Claire's heart was beating like a drum. She realized that this would not be a physical game, but a mental one. Everything she had learned, all the stories her grandmother had told her, would need to be used to defeat the wolf in his own arena. Night fell completely, and, under the pale light of the moon that filtered through the windows of the cottage, the game began. Claire remembered an old story her grandmother had always told her. It was about a man who had tricked the wolf by offering him a false promise of power. With that in mind, Claire began to speak. "Lucian, you consider yourself invincible, but do you know what is more powerful than you?" he asked, trying to buy time. He smiled, amused. "Go on." "The human desire to protect. My grandmother didn't give you a feast. She deceived you, leaving something in you that you haven't yet realized." Lucian narrowed his eyes in confusion. Claire continued. She left a curse, something that will consume you from the inside. You feel it, don't you? This growing pain like something is eating you from the inside? Lucian hesitated. For the first time, Claire saw doubt in his eyes. She took the moment to retrieve an ancient artifact her grandmother had kept in the cottage, a silver dagger covered in ancient runes. That dagger is the key to your downfall, Lucian. If you don't let me go, I will use it against you. Lucian took a step back, still trying to process Claire's words. Feeling cornered, he let out a howl of frustration and disappeared into the darkness, leaving the cabin empty once more. Claire took a deep breath, gripping the dagger tightly. She knew the battle wasn't over, but for tonight she had won. And more importantly, she had survived to tell the tale. The next morning, Claire returned to the village, but something was different. The people who had been hesitant before now looked at her with respect and fear. She told her story to few, but rumors spread. The wolf had been confronted but not defeated. For days, the village remained restless. Some residents wondered if Claire's presence had provoked the wolf's wrath, while others saw her as a potential protector. The young woman, however, knew that the battle was far from over. Lucian was not just a creature, but an entity connected to the depths of the forest and the secrets it held. One afternoon, while helping her mother in the garden, a crow perched on a nearby tree branch, cawing insistently. There was something in its eyes that made Claire stop what she was doing. The crow was carrying something shiny in its beak, a small blue stone that Claire recognized immediately. It belonged to her grandmother. Without a second thought, Claire followed the raven as it flew into the forest. This time there was no hesitation in her steps. The silver dagger was strapped to her waist, and her determination was stronger than her fear. She knew she had to find out what had really happened to her grandmother, and what Lucian was planning. The path the raven was following was different from the one that led to the cabin. It was denser, almost as if the forest were trying to swallow it. Twisted roots poked up from the ground, and the air felt heavier. The raven finally landed in front of a giant tree, its bark seemingly pulsing with a faint light. On the trunk was an inscription that Claire couldn't make out, but it looked familiar. "You shouldn't be here, young Claire." Lucian's voice echoed, but he was nowhere in sight. The forest seemed to speak to her. Claire raised her dagger, trying to remain calm. "Where is my grandmother, Lucian?" she shouted. A low chuckle came from all directions. "Your grandmother was smarter than I thought, but by trying to trick me, she put herself in a place where even I can't reach her now." Claire clenched her fists. "What do you want from me?" For a moment, silence fell, broken only by the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. Then Lucian appeared. Not as the man she had seen before, but as something between human and beast. His golden eyes glowed, and his presence was even more menacing. "You are different, Claire. There is something about you that defies the cycle. You don't just have courage. You have the touch of those who know the threshold between light and dark. I want to understand what you are, and perhaps take it for myself." Claire realized that Lucian was not just a predator. He was a hunter of essences, seeking something that would complete him. She could not defeat him with strength or cunning alone. She would need to unravel the bond between him and the forest. "If it's a game you want, it's a game you'll get," Claire said, planting her feet firmly on the ground. "But this time it'll be on my turf." The light around the tree pulsed brighter, and Claire felt a heat coming from the dagger at her waist. It was as if the object recognized something in the inscription. Remembering her grandmother's stories, she pressed the blade against the tree trunk and muttered words she hadn't known she knew. The forest reacted. The ground shook, and Lucian recoiled, his eyes wide. "What have you done?" he growled. "You are not the only one who understands the secrets of this forest, Lucian. Perhaps my grandmother left me more than stories." The light from the tree formed a sort of portal, and Claire heard her grandmother's voice, faint but clear. "Claire, the choice is yours. Go in and finish this, or go back and live with the weight of what you know." Lucian roared, rushing toward her, but Claire didn't hesitate. She stepped through the portal, feeling the world crumble around her. On the other side, she found a place of light and shadows in constant movement, as if she were inside the very heart of the forest. And there, in the center, was her grandmother, bound by chains made of dark energy. Lucian appeared right behind her, but something had changed. He seemed weaker, less sure of himself. "This is not your place, Lucian," Claire said, pointing her dagger at him. "And I will make sure you never threaten my family or my village again." The final battle was intense, with Lucian using all his remaining power to try to subdue Claire. However, the young woman now had the forest on her side. The trees seemed to move to protect her, while the pulsing light of the place weakened each attack of the wolf. With one final thrust, Claire drove the dagger into the shadow that represented Lucian's true heart. A howl echoed through the forest as he disappeared in a cloud of thick smoke. The chains binding her grandmother fell apart, and she fell into Claire's arms, weak but alive. "You did it, my dear," said the grandmother with a tired smile. Claire helped her grandmother through the portal back into the forest. When they returned, the world seemed brighter, as if a weight had been lifted from the heart of the village and the forest itself. Back in the village, Claire was welcomed as a hero, but deep down she knew her life would never be the same again. The dagger, now hanging at her waist, was a constant reminder of what she had faced and what she might yet face. The forest was at peace, at least for now. But Claire was ready for any challenge the future might bring, with the courage of someone who had faced the wolf and won.